Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Sherrod Davis. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Ecomap Technologies. I'm thrilled to welcome you to our first ecosystem talk of 2024, titled LinkedIn Loyal, Building a Sticky Connected Community, with our friend Jamie McDonald. Jamie is the recently retired CEO of Upsurge Baltimore. She brings a wealth of experience as an executive, an entrepreneur, and a movement builder. Her career highlights include serving as a CEO of Upsurge Baltimore, managing director and investment banker at Deutsche Bank and Alex Brown. She's founded organizations like Generosity and GiveCore. Notably, she played a key role in initiatives like Giving Tuesday and Light City in Baltimore, which is amazing, demonstrating her commitment to social innovation and community building. In addition to her many accomplishments, Jamie is also the author of the book Big, set to come out in 2024. Today, Jamie will share strategies, success stories, and firsthand experiences to create a cohesive community and foster loyalty. Jamie, we're thrilled to have you here for this edition of Ecosystem Talks. Thank you again and welcome.
Thank you, Sherrod. It's great to be with you and your team and with the community that you're building at Ecomap. And excited to have a chance to talk about how we build community to the benefit of our various organizations. Should I dive right in?
The show is yours.
Okay. So just to start off, I mean, Sherrod, you gave a great background, but I'm going to just share a little bit about me. I'm not going to read this to you, but perhaps to focus on one area that I think is most relevant to this conversation, which is that I really got connected to the concept of community building as an approach to growth when I had my company GiveCore, which was a software company that I founded in 2010 that was really focused on civic engagement and community building using technology. And at the time, we weren't talking about movement building as much as we do today, as a way to bring sort of passionate communities together. But I saw firsthand how that intersection of technology and a passionate community could really drive disproportionate growth. And so a lot of the experiences that we're going to talk about today come from that experience of building GiveCore, and then the lessons I learned there that have carried me forward in the rest of what I've done professionally since I sold that company in 2014. So we're going to be digging in today to my experiences as well as things I've been able to observe with people that have grown big efforts across the country. And hopefully give you some very concrete ways that you can think about applying the concepts of community building to growing your ecosystem or your company if you're a founder, or your effort if you're a nonprofit. So let's jump in. So first, just to kind of level set on a couple of key concepts, and some of this may seem evident, but I want to make sure that we are being really specific about what we're talking about as we go through this. So the first is understanding what a customer is. A customer is basically just somebody who buys something from you if you're a company. And if you're an initiative or an ecosystem builder or a nonprofit, you probably think more about supporters. So people who advocate for you, who donate, who are passionate about the thing that you're trying to build. But then the thing that brings it all together is this concept of community. And obviously that is really what this webinar is about today, is how you take those either customers or supporters and harness their collective energy as a community to really supercharge the effort that you're building. So throughout this discussion, we're going to focus on this key concept of kind of weaving a community. And so, you know, if you think about fabric, if you've ever seen a loom, if you haven't, you can easily look up a picture on the internet. It looks kind of like this. But the north and south, or the vertical part of the loom is just the sort of the core the core components of your ecosystem or your company. So it's the company itself, and it's the supporters or customers that you're trying to attract. And if all you have is just that level of connection, that you're selling a product, or you're, working on a cause that, is sort of this one-way street, you're not going to have very strong fabric. What really brings it together is when you begin to think about what are the professional and emotional connections that I can foster among my supporters and customers that create that connective tissue, or create that, the cross weaving here that really drives a linked and loyal community. So I'm going to take as a given that you all know your company or your ecosystem effort way better than I ever will, and you know who your supporters or target customers are. So the thing I'm really going to focus on today is this weaving of the strategies for developing those professional and emotional connections that create that linkage and that loyalty that drives a powerful community. Because a connected community is really like a winning team. They're smarter, they're faster, they're more responsive, they're more resilient, and it's strategic. So it is really it's the coach. In many cases, that's probably you, but perhaps it's somebody on your team who you dedicate to thinking about how you not just sell a great product or pursue an important mission, but how do you then also develop those emotional connections with your customers or your supporters that bring them together as a team, so that you get the benefit of your collective efforts in growing whatever you're growing. And I'm showing a bunch of company logos here because I think it's something that we can all relate to, but community drives intensity and loyalty. So if you think about brands that have true intense followings, it isn't necessarily because they have the very best thing out there, right? You could argue that, the non-brand name bricks that kids use are exactly the same as a Lego, but Lego is a strong outperforming company because of the work that they've put in to building a connected community. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Lego in a minute. Think about Harley Davidson. They were probably the first true community building brand that most of us are aware of. Harley early on created the concept of their rallies. They made their stores places where cyclists could come and hang out. They really leaned into their brand as an identifier of a community. And as a result, Harley has a cult-like following that creates a real moat around their business and has allowed them to grow year in and year out, even in the face of lots of competition. And so you can look at many of the other brands and initiatives on this chart and see that same story over and over again, that these are brands that stand for something. They think about how to build loyalty in their community. They bring people together in real life and virtually. And of course, they also focus on selling a great product. But I will tell you that there are mediocre products with strong communities that outperform great products with weak communities. So in a perfect world, you have both. You have both a great product or a great mission and a strong community. But if you have to choose one, choose a strong community. So let's talk a little bit more about how we do that. So there are really three core concepts to building community. One is a movement mindset. The second is understanding the impact of intensity versus scale. And the third is really understanding how your brand builds connection. So let's dig into those. So the first concept is a movement mindset. So if you start with the idea that you're building something that's valuable, and hopefully everyone on this call is really passionate about the thing that they're building, then hopefully other people feel that same sense of passion and connection. Because what we know is that being a human is about much more than just existing. It's really about belonging. And so belonging is at its heart the concept of community. But for you to be the thing that people get passionate about belonging to means they have to think it's worth it. They have to think that there's value to them, value to you, and then value to the people that are being impacted by the work. And so you really need to understand and then think like a movement builder. And so these are when I teach movement building as a construct, these are the kind of the 6 elements of movement building that really create the foundation for how you grow a rapidly scaling effort. And the first is to understand, why we exist. And usually that is because there is some kind of change that you want to create in the world. Then the second concept is belief. So what do we believe? Because a belief system is the thing that brings people together around a common mission. So they believe in, you see this in religion, you see this in, people that believe in a Mac versus a PC. You see a belief system in all kinds of elements of our daily life. And when you say, like, why am I passionate about this thing that I do every day? Usually it's because you have some common goal that you share with the people that you do this with. The next focus of a movement builder is understanding the outcomes that you're striving for. So what's going to change? Who will change? And then importantly, in the long run, how is that change going to happen? And how do we measure it? Then the fourth thing is, in some cases, the easiest and sometimes the hardest, which is who's one of us. Because I think when we're building something that we really passionately believe in, I think our instincts are often that everyone should want to be part of this because it's so obviously important. But the truth is that most of the time, it takes people a while to really recognize why they should be part of your community. And most really effective communities actually have really powerful communities of non-believers. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The next 2 things are really kind of a cycle. So how do we grow? So what are the levers of growth in community building? And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then the final thing is, how do we continually co-create with our community? And so this next chart is a bit of an eyeful, but it's really putting this all together into a system that you can see. So bear with me and I'll explain this. But if you start at the middle, we talked about the why do you exist? So what's the problem you're solving? Are you working to build an entrepreneurial community like like Amanda from Charlottesville? Are you working on building a product like the ecosystem team, the EcoMap team? Are you a nonprofit that's working to, end poverty or hunger or homelessness? But that center problem is really the thing that is the heart of everything that you do. Then starting at the top, you build an organization that has a team. In some cases, if you're a business, it has a product. And you think about what markets you're trying to pursue to most effectively solve the problem that you're working on. So then you go to the left and you've got to have some initial customers or supporters. And if you don't, then you probably need to reevaluate whether the problem you're solving is actually something that has a market or an audience. But assuming that you're able to build those customers or supporters, what will start to happen is as you help them solve their problem, some true believers will emerge. And those true believers, they're like super fans. They're your power users. Every company, every ecosystem, every nonprofit has these people that become like the heartbeat of your effort. Because when you need somebody, when you need an advocate, when you need word of mouth, when you need a testimonial, these are the people that stand up and say, I believe so much in what you're doing that, like, I'm here for you. I'm the one that's going to help you do, get other people on board. So that person is really important. And then you'll see what happens there is those true believers, because of their word of mouth, that yellow arrow goes back up to customers or supporters, because those true believers tell other people. And those other people now become new customers and supporters. And then some subgroup of them become new true believers. So that piece of this quadrant is really important. The other thing that you get from your true believers, if you're a smart organization that is thoughtfully thinking about how you grow your community, is you ask them for feedback regularly. You listen, you learn from them, you adapt, you create feedback mechanisms, you track it with data, and then you make changes. And because they've been part of helping you evolve, you go back to them and say, we heard you, we've made this change because of your input. Does this address what you were hoping we would do better? If it does, you kind of make that change for everybody, because your true believers are the ones that are really up close using the product like power users, or engaging with you as true believers. Now, again, the fact that you've shown them that you hear them. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, hang on. Sorry about that. So as they tell people that you've continually gotten better because of their input, they continue to build that word of mouth referral network that builds your customers and supporters. But then finishing up the quadrant on the left-hand side, as you listen, learn, and adapt, you now know, what new team members do you need? What evolution do I need to make to my product? What are the new ways I need to take my idea into the market so that we continue to build those customers and supporters? And so this is a system that I've both led. I learned it over time. I didn't start off understanding it. But I've now used this with major global movements, as well as companies and organizations, to help them really figure out how they build a rapidly growing community. So let's talk about two specific examples that kind of show the impact. Again, I'm using companies because we all know companies, and we don't necessarily all know specific startups or individual community efforts. So I want to stay with Lego for a minute. So Lego is an example of a company that was really on death's door. I think a lot of people don't know this, but you can see in this chart that in 2003 and 2004, Lego was losing billions of dollars a year. And what they basically had been doing for the, 50 years of their history at that point, was they were selling plastic bricks to kids. They were basically selling toys. And you remember in the beginning, I said, if all you are is a company that sells a product, it's really hard to sustain your growth. So in 2003 and 2004, Lego went through this entire reimagination of the company. And they realized, remember that very first thing that I had in that bubble chart of how movements grow is, why do you exist and what do you believe? Well, Lego rethought those two questions, and they decided that they exist to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. And by reframing why they existed, they changed everything about the way that they went to market. So they built a Lego community that they call Lego Ideas. And the Lego Ideas community was open to anybody who wanted to submit an idea about what their next products could be. They created LegoCon. Some of you have seen the Lego movie. They now have competitions all around the world that are kind of connected to like architecture and using Legos to build really, creative and inventive buildings. And imagine if you were a parent, because kids aren't necessarily the ones who, directly have the money to purchase, but imagine if you're a parent and your kid just says like, I want more Legos. That's a one kind of connection. But if you're a parent and buying a Lego means that you're helping your child become a builder of tomorrow, maybe a future architect, maybe a future engineer, that is an entirely different emotional connection to the Lego brand than just buying plastic bricks to keep your kids busy on a Saturday morning. So look what happened with Lego sales after they shifted to this model of community building and a mission that was about the builders of tomorrow. It fundamentally changed the entire trajectory of the company. I'm going to give you one other quick example. Salesforce, some of you may be familiar with, some of you may use it. Salesforce is basically a customer management system, of which there are a gazillion, and there were many, many of them even before Salesforce existed. But Salesforce was one of the first companies that really understood the power of both virtual and real life community building. And they not only, had a really effective, great product and an effective sales infrastructure, but right from the beginning, they created little sub communities. So they had communities of nonprofits, they had communities of tech companies, and those communities got increasingly subdivided and defined, so that Salesforce was using its members to teach each other how best to use Salesforce. So that not only allowed them to scale because they were building this, this sort of connected community, but also from an efficiency perspective, Salesforce could let a lot of the learning and product adoption happen in these forum groups instead of having to have more and more and more and more customer support people or customer success people. And ultimately, this grew into Dreamforce, which is their mega conference that can attract up to 200,000 people in a year. And that Dreamforce makes people feel like they're part of this mega community. And it builds trust. It provides a feedback loop for Salesforce. It lets these forum members who meet virtually all year long meet in real life and continually deepen their connection. So we're going to talk now about how we take some of these concepts into like your effort, your business, your initiative, your community. So the first is to understand this concept of intensity versus scale. So this is important because, just going back to the Lego example a minute ago, what if I don't have an emotional connection? I'm not going to feel anything intense about a product. So when Lego shifted to this concept of builders of tomorrow, and both the parents and now the kids, by virtue of the parents' excitement in engaging children in this idea of picking out Legos or building or sitting down together and thinking like the builders of tomorrow, you're deepening this sense of connection and intensity. And that intensity creates passion, and passion drives action. And then the second piece of this here is, whatever you're doing, if it matters, you're going to have non-believers, you're going to have haters. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the context of some of the things that I've been involved in before. So I love this example with Nike because all of you probably remember the controversy surrounding Colin Kaepernick and his decision to kneel during the national anthem. And there were passionate views on all sides of his decision to do this. And and it was immensely controversial. And most brands stayed far, far away from this because there were such strong feelings on both sides. But Nike was very interesting in their approach. They decided that their audience were largely on the side of the statement that Colin Kaepernick was trying to make, and that for those who weren't, they were okay with that. And so they released this ad, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything, in a global splash on a single night, like around the world. And when this came out, it created such an uproar both ways. You can imagine how the people that believed in Kaepernick's mission felt. You can see, the results, that their online sales jumped 31% after the ad was released. But you can also imagine that, there were people that said, I'll never wear Nikes again. But Nike decided that the passion they could drive by taking a stand mattered more than the sales they might lose among the people that weren't their core audience anyway. That's a hard decision to make when you're a leader. It's the right decision to drive growth. So how do you start to think about going through the levels of building these connected communities, creating this intensity, creating this passion for the thing that you're doing? So it's important to understand that this is not, a 0 to 60 initiative. At level 1, you remember my loom, my weaving analogy? At level 1, you are basically just a company or an initiative or a nonprofit, and you're trying to build customers or supporters. That's base level relationships. It's like, I have a product, you have a need, I hope you'll consider buying it, or I hope you'll consider engaging with my effort. And you're beginning that process of trust building, meaning I can, in fact, help you do whatever you're trying to do better, which moves you into what I call the usefulness phase. You start to become useful for the community that you're trying to build. And so they're like, okay, yeah, this product works for me, or this ecosystem effort that has reached out to me is actually adding value. They're helping me make connections I wasn't going to make, or they're helping me gain knowledge I wouldn't have otherwise gained. And from that group, you start to see early adopters emerging. So you start to see the people that are saying, wow, this really is good. This really does matter to me. Then you move, that's where you start to have the opportunity for these emotional connections. And emotional connections happen because you create opportunities to meet with people in person. So now you're not just an idea and an effort that's useful, but now you're a human that's connected to them, or you start to connect them with other people that are in the same situation that they're in. Or you start to show how the benefits of one may accrue to the benefits of all. And as that happens, you can move into the next stage, which is where people emerge within your network that can build their own social capital. So if you're an ecosystem builder, I've had many of these. I've led many ecosystems. You will ultimately have people who you'll hold up as experts. So you draw people from your community and you write about them, or you feature them in a webinar, or you host an Ask Me Anything session where your constituent or your customer is being positioned as an expert. So they're building their own social capital. And from that featuring of them, they gain new networks. And then finally, those true believers become the nodes. If you remember when I was saying that the true believers in that system chart that we showed a little bit ago are so central to your success, they become people who start to sell for you, who start to teach for you, and really help to supercharge the community or the product that you're trying to build. So those true believers are absolutely pivotal. And again, linking back to the Nike example that we talked about a moment ago, that's why Nike was willing to take that risk, because they were leaning into the passion of their true believers. So this then has some tactics that are, you know, that are embedded in it. These are very specific ideas that you can actually use tomorrow. You could start thinking about how you pursue those levels that we talked about a minute ago in actual tactical actions. So the first is, how do you, I call this the SPACE model, just to try to build an acronym around it. But basically, how do you create the right support and success model for your customers or your constituents? So sometimes it's those forum that we talked about, like with Salesforce, where they got their early nonprofit customers together, they got their early tech customers together, their early healthcare customers together. It's really solid FAQs, whether that is literally on your site, or that is accessibility of customer service people to quickly answer questions, because you really want to make sure that those early constituents and customers can get what they need when they need it. Nothing is more frustrating than trying to use your product. You run into a roadblock and you can't get the answer when you need it. And then the third is to create a way that your community can support each other. So these are kind of the base level of support and success. Then you want to go into innovation and feedback. I use the term product here when I'm talking to companies, but this really applies to anybody that's trying to scale a community. You need to ask for feedback from real partners or customers or supporters so that you can continue to innovate and learn. Then, we think about this ambassador concept. So this is working toward those true believers, working toward those people that are going to be the ultimate drivers of your scale. And so you want to create special connections with your most passionate believers. You want to send them unexpected swag. You want to, we talked about, you want to feature them. You want to give them chances to shine, to be the experts. You want to bring them in to perhaps speak to your internal team or your, or your board about their experience. So you're really positioning them as central to your success, and then they become ambassadors for you out there in the world. Then there's content and programming. We talked with this Dreamforce, or with Lego, they do these on-site building experiences that we talked about. And then finally, external engagement, think about Harley rallies, or when Peloton invites, their users from across the country into their New York studios for Peloton rides. So that's the SPACE model. These are really specific tactical ideas to help you begin to build out this model of identifying your true believers. And the reason that all of this is so important is because a small group of intensely passionate believers are really the foundation of your growth, if you can support them and continuously inspire them. Because the reality is, if you can't find these people, then you're a commodity. Then even if you are able to build your customer base, when a cheaper, better version comes along, those people will leave for that in a minute. What keeps people connected to you is this sense of intensity. And so it's a really critical part of building fast. So we could talk about a lot of elements of this, but one really concrete one that I want to talk about today is branding. Because if your brand and your efforts are not aligned, it's almost like, music being out of tune. The harmony doesn't work. It's that singer who's off key in a choir. All of this has to be aligned so that it harmonizes in a way that makes those believers, makes those partners, make those customers feel like they understand what they're part of. So there's really a system that I have found in my experience over 30 years engaged in various, efforts to be most successful. And for a long time, I didn't have like the structure around it. But thankfully, a guy named Patrick Hanlon developed something called the primal branding system that really captured a lot of what I was seeing. And so we talked a bit ago about the concept of belonging. Well, this is really taking the concept of belonging and connecting it to your brand. So let's dig into that. So all effective brands have a creation story. So it's like, two guys in a garage, two kids in a college dorm create an app to rate girls, a pharmacist creates a secret soft drink formula, that's Coke. And I'm going to use some examples from my most recent effort, Upsurge, just to kind of show you how I took this concept and really used it in the way that we built our ecosystem building engine, which really has in just about 3 years really become a game changer for Baltimore, if I may say so myself. I am not leading it anymore, so it's in the capable hands of one of my colleagues. But I want to make that connection so that we can sort of see some ideas in real life. So Upsurge was focused on building Baltimore's tech community around a distinct kind of mission called Equitech, which was to build the world's first truly inclusive tech community. And so in our creation story, we had a group of key local leaders, which was the owner of the Baltimore Ravens, Johns Hopkins University, and a big financial services firm in town called Brown Advisory, came together to build a new kind of startup city. And that's where we started. A creed is a simple statement of essentially your core principles. And so, you can think about the start of America, that all men are created equal, a belief in life after death, a belief, I'm not advocating this, but I'm just showing how powerful it is in making America great again. Or, maybe you're a little t-shirt shop, and you decide that you're going to be the greatest t-shirt shop in the whole world. Well, in the Upsurge example, we decided that we were going to build the first Equitech city. And that was our creed. Icons. So icons are these little concentrations of meaning that connect to a brand. So think about the Nike swoosh, or, a flag, or a cross, or a hammer and sickle in Russia, or hashtags, or red MAGA hats, or colors and logos are the most obvious ones. But they're really the touchstones of a belief system, and they can involve any of your senses. So, because I think about things like the way that we think about something like, Toll House cookies, which is just a chocolate chip cookie, but they created a brand around it. And just think about the almost like the smell, if you've ever made them, that comes into your brain when you think about Toll House cookies, that doesn't if you think about another chocolate chip cookie, right? There's something about it because they connected it to a brand that brought it all together. And that's just an example of how you really can think about this as a really sensory experience. And so in the Upsurge example, we had a logo that we used in a lot of really creative ways to both extend it so that it welcomed our community in, but created the continuity of this upward arrow of progress. We had a really distinct palette. We continually connected everything we did into images of Baltimore, because Baltimore is really at the heart of what we were working toward, this first inclusive tech community. And we had regular kind of notable hats and t-shirts. Actually, Ecomap does an excellent job of this too. If you haven't seen their t-shirts, you should. That really brought together our mission with this sort of way that we wanted to connect our community. So let's talk about rituals, because rituals are incredibly powerful. Now, rituals, I will say, are sometimes the hardest things to just actively create. they often happen as you interact with your community. So you try things, and if people respond, then you try it again and you see if it's something that people universally engage with. So let's talk about some rituals, repeated interactions. So one of the rituals people forget that Apple created was this concept of double click. Now we take double clicking, for granted, but when Macs came out and we're trying to get rid of a mouse, they had to come up with this idea, this way to sort of let you make something happen without having to move back and forth between a keyboard and a mouse. So this double click concept was born. Think about swiping. Again, another innovation from the iPhone. Now we take swiping so for granted. It's part of everything we do with technology. But swiping was a ritual that Apple tried in the beginning to see how it would work for people. And I guarantee you, if swiping hadn't worked, they would have come up with something else. But now swiping is entirely ubiquitous in our lives. But then we can go into brands. Think about the concept of twisting the Oreo before you eat it. Again, I'm going to keep using Donald Trump, and you're going to see why in a minute. But think in the first run about that lock her up chant. If you're a beer drinker, think about the way that Guinness is so focused on this perfect pour that generates that big, foamy head on the top. Because rituals are a way that you take, the chaos of all the things that could be, and you bring them into a sense of order. And they also make people feel like they're kind of part of the club because they understand the power of the ritual. And so in the Upsurge example, we completely accidentally had a gathering after an AMA session one day at a bar, and we just kind of laughing called it Equitech Tuesday. And people said to us, well, let's get together again next week. And now Equitech Tuesdays are a weekly gathering open to anybody in the tech community or anybody in Baltimore who wants to come in and see what things are about. And we have, they have anywhere from 30 to 150 people at these Tuesdays every single Tuesday, because it has become a ritual in our community. But we also made rituals out of data releases and the way that we measured and celebrated our community. We also made it a core part of the work of every one of our team members to participate in founder calls, both so that the founders in our community knew that we were reaching out to them, seeing what they needed, checking how we were doing for them, understanding what their challenges were, but also because we thought that that was part of our discipline, our ritual of showing our direct connectivity with our community. Sacred words. This is the language, the lexicon of your effort. Again, one of the things that is hard to create like with perfect clarity, because some of it happens as you build. But if you think about brands with really strong lexicons, iPhone, iPod, iMac, think about Ben & Jerry's ice cream, how a big part of what differentiated them was not just that they were a mission-focused ice cream company, but they had these clever names that you would be part of the Cherry Garcia group or the Fish Food group. Think about the Obama campaign and Hope and Change. Think about the way we order from Starbucks. Think about Jordans for Nike. These lexicons are so vital because it's just like being a French speaker versus being a Spanish speaker. You feel that instant sense of connection when you know the language. And so in Upsurge's example, we were very deliberate, obviously, about this term Equitech, which is a phrase we coined. We talk about this idea of prosper in place, which is essentially how our own communities can benefit from the growth of the tech community. Instead of saying underserved or disadvantaged founders, we use the term underestimated founders because we wanted to lift them up for their potential and promise. And we talked a lot about anti-gentrification as a concept. So those were the words that became part of our lexicon. And then finally, I want to talk about non-believers, because this is the hardest thing for so many people that are builders to really get comfortable with. This was the hardest thing for that my team, dealt with, which is to realize that if you're doing something important, you are going to have non-believers. It is just the way it is. And, to some extent, what's the phrase, like F the haters, you kind of have to like just say, I believe in what I'm doing so passionately that I'm heads down moving forward. And so, you can see every powerful connected community almost has an anti-community. Democrats and Republicans, Mac and PC, PlayStation, Xbox, fast food eaters versus organic. And honestly, understanding who the non-believers are helps us to define who we are. Link this all the way back to that Nike example. Nike was so confident or so hopeful that by taking a stand on the Colin Kaepernick issue, they would deepen their momentum with their believers, that they were willing to risk the wrath of their non-believers. And in Upsurge's example, we had plenty of this ourselves for good reasons. People who didn't believe tech could be inclusive, diverse founders who had been let down by past efforts, other organizations who thought we were late to the party, or people who perceive themselves as competitors who worried that our success would diminish their reputations. If we had let any of that slow us down, Upsurge wouldn't be where it is today. And then there's you, because I'm assuming if you are on this call today or listening to this call in the recording, that you are somebody that is working on something you believe in passionately. And, and ultimately, the leader is the one that decides that they're in it to win it. That they're trying to change, a community, a cause, a product and effort, that they can do something better than it was done before. Going to give you 3 very quick examples, and then we're going to open it up to any questions that people have. So you've heard me talk a bit about the Trump campaign, and that's because even as somebody, I'll lay my politics out there, that is, that is really scared of Trump. I admire the fact that he understood this concept so well of connecting a community and a brand together, that really he was our first true brand president. And so I could take any of these things, creation story, creed, icons, and you could tell me the answer to those without me having to tell you. So think about how powerful that is. If I had said to do the same thing in the Hillary Clinton campaign, if you were a political person following that campaign, even if you loved her, you would have a hard time filling out this list. But Biden got the idea. So he was clear about his creation story. He had a creed that people understood. He had a whole series of icons. This was back during COVID. So remember, drive-in rallies, honking, masking, social distancing, those actually became rituals that he wove into the campaign to sort of demonstrate, and the sort of anti, the non-believer part of what Trump was doing. And then obviously there were non-believers both on the conservative and the liberal side, and the leader. And then I'll give you one brand because I think it's one everybody relates to, Apple. You know the story, 2 guys in a garage. Their original creed was think differently. We know their icons, the logo. Think about that silver and white color palette that now is everywhere, but that was such a revolution when Apple brought it out. Think about swiping, the way people buy music, at least did before streaming, how we use iPhoto. Think about new releases, lots of sacred words, lots of non-believers, and obviously the original leader, Steve Jobs. So when you bring this all together, and this is where we'll, more or less finish up today with one last concept that we'll talk about in a second. The result is that you have a powerful mission, you're building a connected community, you understand the power of true believers, and then you're aligning all of that with a harmonious brand. And when you do that, you will create a community that powers your work now and into the future because they tingle with every brand breath they take. That's the big finish. But one final thought is sometimes it's easy to forget why people connect with you. And most people don't connect with you because you are an ecosystem builder, or because you're EcoMap and you're building you're building great ecosystem software. Most people connect with you because there is something that they are trying to change, and their connection with you is the drill that makes the hole. But if there was another way for them to make that hole, they would do it. So it's constantly important to be just like unwaveringly aware of the problem your community is trying to solve, and not to be so wedded to the solution that people move away from you when there's a faster or better way for someone else to solve it. So that concept, most people when they buy a drill don't just want to own a drill, they want to make a hole. So with that, I will hand it over to the EcoMap team, and thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you, Jamie. F the haters, right? You made it when you have haters. That's what I
right.
heard. Really awesome stuff, Jamie, and hopefully impactful for everyone who was able to tune in. Thank you so much for being here and your insights. Always appreciate you. And thanks for everyone who joined on the Zoom or listened on LinkedIn. If you did join, or even if you did just register, we'll circulate a recording and also the slides that Jamie used. And if you want to stay connected with Jamie, best place is LinkedIn, I'm guessing,
Yep.
to find you on LinkedIn. And if you want to stay connected with the EcoMap team, you can find us on all major social channels at EcoMap Tech. Thanks again, and we'll send updates about the upcoming ecosystem talks as well. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day and a great rest of their week. Bye.